Hello and welcome back. It's September and that means it's another edition of the Microsoft Teams show. Some big news last month, a lot to discuss, so let's connect and break down what is new. I'm Kristian McCann from UC Today, and I'm joined by Tom Arbuthnot from Empowering.Cloud and our stellar panel of Microsoft Teams experts who know this space inside and out. We do also have another special guest for you this month, Tristan Gayford, who will be talking about his experiences deploying Teams across multiple geographical locations. So stay tuned for that. But for now, let's go to our panel and discuss the news. As always, great to all have you. Thanks for joining us. Tom, how are things looking in the world this month?
Yeah, so we just come off the back of August, so traditionally a quieter month. The AI stuff has kept rolling all through the summer, which has been really interesting. Normally it would go dead kind of towards the end of July. Everybody from Microsoft would be off. But yeah, lots of interesting announcements, and we got some sneak peeks of things that are coming on the roadmap for kind of September, October, November as well.
Speaking of interesting announcements, let's start off with one of the bombshells that came over August, and that is Microsoft is killing their enterprise agreement discounts. So Microsoft is scrapping all their volume licensing discounts for online services November 2025. Potentially a really big one. What do you make of this? Good for smaller people, bad for bigger companies?
Yeah, I mean, Microsoft is generally trying to level out how pricing works. So traditionally, if you're a big org, you would have these special enterprise agreements, special agreements about what you got, and you negotiate them with Microsoft directly. And they've been trying to increasingly keep that to only very, very big organizations, and everybody else can just buy off the website or buy via partners, and it's all the same. And this is another step in that direction. But it does mean for some organizations that have been able to negotiate discounts in those bands previously, now it doesn't really matter whether they buy it from the website, they buy it via partners, or they have an EA. It's going to be the same pricing bands essentially.
Do you think this pricing band could perhaps get people to reconsider their use of Microsoft Online Services, or are they pretty much embedded in some companies' infrastructure so much that it's kind of you have to take it, this bitter pill?
I mean, that always comes up when prices change, and obviously it's a competitive market. You can go to somebody else if you want to, but it's a very big move to move away from Microsoft 365 if you're using the stack. And if you do the maths on trying to add up an equivalent stack, is the saving and the stress of moving and all the other bits and pieces actually worth it? And when I say stress, just not the IT stress, but users and user change and business change. So yeah, I think it's not the kind of change that I don't think is going to make anybody reassess their M365 investment. But if you are, interested to hear.
Okay, well, moving on to M365, it's implemented Copilot GPT-5 integration. Is this a game changer, hype machine? I know people weren't too impressed with GPT-5 when it rolled out. Kevin, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think, certainly the GPT-5 rollout didn't go as planned from Sam Altman and OpenAI's perspective. But a lot of that, I think, you have to focus on. A lot of it was kind of a personality thing. Like people didn't like that GPT-5 seemed to give terser responses than GPT-4o. And so I don't think that there was any arguing that it was giving incorrect responses. Now, the other thing that happened is the expectations were like through the roof, right? And so I think obviously, when expectations were, they were talking about AGI back when GPT-4 was out. So clearly GPT-5 is not, artificial general intelligence. I think it was interesting, the same day that GPT-5 was introduced, Jairus Patero, corporate vice president of Microsoft, made the announcement that, and now you could try it inside of Copilot. I think that there has been some, rumors about the relationship between Microsoft and OpenAI, perhaps not being as strong as it once was. So I think that this was, somewhat of a marketing move. Overall, what I think people should focus on is, yes, you need a good large language model, But really, Copilot, the strength, especially inside of Teams and inside of M365, is that it has context. The smartest model in the world doesn't help you, schedule a meeting if it doesn't have access to your calendar. It can't highlight important emails if it doesn't have access to your emails. So, Copilot for M365 is powerful from a business perspective because, yes, it has a smart model. Now, potentially, GPT-5, or they have a smart mode. They pick the right model at the right time. But the key thing is that it has access to your context. And really, that's why you would consider paying the $30 per user per month. So a lot of hype. I think it's not going to be negative to, Copilot or Teams, but it's not going to be world changing, other as well. So there's my take on that.
Okay, well, you also mentioned that maybe it's sort of intended to show the strength between OpenAI and Microsoft, because I know there's been some tension within that partnership. Adding to that tension, Microsoft has unveiled its first in-house AI models. Although it's mainly focused on the consumer side right now, it will be working across Copilot, which has traditionally been powered by OpenAI's models. What do you make of that? Is this a sign that Microsoft are really trying to shift away and kind of develop all their things in-house?
Yeah, so I'll give a quick take, and then I'd like to throw it over to Tom and the other experts. But so I think Microsoft has always, like, if you look at Microsoft research, they've always been looking at different models. So they have a lot of research around small language models. When you're running, anything, a large language model or any, AI at scale, there's the training cost, which is really expensive, but then there's the inference cost. And so what you want to do when you have millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of users is use, the best, most cost efficient model. And sometimes that means, not, going to the giant model if you're asking a simple question. And so I don't think that this shows anything other than Microsoft is continuing to, optimize. One of the big things about GPT-5 that, maybe people missed is it is self-optimizing. So you used to have to if you go to ChatGPT, there was a bunch of models. You had to pick a drop down, pick which model. And, GPT-5 took that requirement away from the user. And it basically says, hey, if it's a tough question, I'm going to use all the powering of inference. And so I think Microsoft is doing some of that as well. That's kind of my take, but I'm going to throw it over to you, Tom. And what do you think?
Yeah, and I think you've hit on the key point there. So these are Microsoft has released models in the past. These are the first models under the new MAI naming. And as you said there, just to give everybody context who's listening, one is a voice model for kind of generating podcast type scenarios. Give it text and it generates a conversation. The other one's like a kind of more foundational model. These are not the huge GPT-4, GPT-5 type models. And it's really confusing when Microsoft talks about these things. So they talk about it coming into Copilot, but as you said, it's coming into Copilot Consumer, not right. M365 Copilot. And I think, Kevin, you're bang on with that. GPT-5, the big step forward is really the model having a routing engine to be like, I'll send it to the lightweight model, or I'll send it to deeper reasoning and do reasoning over it, which is good for users who aren't as technical because they don't have to choose a drop down of which model suits best. But the thing that annoyed some of the kind of more kind of advanced users was I can't proactively select my model anymore. So I just want to live in the best, most expensive model. I pay my $20 or $30. I don't care that it costs you loads to compute. I just want to use the best one there is. I want it to reason every time. So we're kind of at this interesting point where the big AI companies, whoever it may be, Microsoft, Anthropic, OpenAI, Google, ultimately are going to want to optimize their compute costs by using different models. And does it become the tool chooses, or do you as a pro user get to choose the model you want? And how does that tension go on in the coming months? Like at the moment, M365 Copilot is all ChatGPT 5. Do I get infinite deep reasoning on that, or do I get it capped at some point, and do I only get the lightweight model? Or at some point, do Microsoft sub in their models and I can't say, no, I want the OpenAI model? So I think this is a developing space, but for sure Microsoft will continue to invest in their own models, but they're not at a point where they're going to move away from the OpenAI models anytime soon.
Yeah, I just want to just add one fun part with that voice model. I would suggest people go try it, because you can give it any text and you can say, read it like you're excited, read it like you're sad, read it. And it's amazing, especially if you take like a business paragraph and just like change the intonation. It's quite fun. So that's a good thing, especially we're recording this on the holiday Monday, at least for us in North America. So if you're watching this and want to have a little fun, try that little voice model that Microsoft.
Maybe the AI is coming to get us in the podcast space at some point soon. We'll have to be careful.
So, Windows gets a makeover. Microsoft is rolling out a lightweight taskbar app for allowing users to initiate team calls, look up organization contacts, and manage relationships without having to navigate through multiple applications. Are they again at risk of the wrath of the EU by bringing closer integrations between Teams and its 365 suite?
Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting because obviously we've been back and forward with this, the EU not wanting Microsoft to so tightly integrate. I think the big tension point is when Microsoft do things that third parties don't have the option to do. So there was a lot of talk over, for example, opening up these capabilities to have links jump to other, to WebEx or to Zoom potentially. This seems to revolve around the People app, which is more kind of consumer orientated. So maybe this is a bit more Teams consumer than Teams M365 Teams. But yeah, it's I don't think this is enough to get the EU worried. I think if anything, the EU should be looking at the AI conversation at the moment as to like what that ship has not yet sailed, whereas the Teams ship has thoroughly sailed with hundreds of millions of users now.
Okay, and lastly, Cisco's Android 13 certification. Every Cisco device in Microsoft Teams Room portfolio is now recertified on Android 13. Cisco is strengthening their Teams interoperability despite owning WebEx. Graham, what do you think of this?
So all OEMs in the Teams devices space, whether it's phones, rooms, panels, whatever it might be, are all updating their Android operating system version. And that's because Microsoft have a certification window, and every 2 years you have to recertify your devices. And based on your Android level, it's you're granted for 2 years. So this is just Cisco announcing, saying, hey, we're on 11, we're moving to 13, so we're going to recertify our devices again. And this will get us to, I think it's 2027 and then 2029. And then in 2 years' time, we'll see another announcement, hey, Cisco moving to Android 15 or next. So it's just this evolution of all OEMs doing this. And at some point, some OEMs will say, okay, look, this device can't go past Android 13 or 15, whatever it might be. And they're going to sunset that and release a new version and certify it on there. So it's just the evolution of all products. So it's, again, good for enterprises, concerned about security. They're going to have the latest fixes in there. The key thing is, with the Android operating system, it's not like your cell phone or mobile phone where it's always up to date. They're bringing out patches and fixes. It's a lot more complex in the room. So these are locked down and secured anyway, and they have your in-tune policies in place. And then the OEMs do that, what we call major upgrade of that operating system version. And they don't do it, every release because it's a lot of work. So hence why Cisco are jumping from this 11 to 13. And for example, Neat will go from 10 to 13 and others are doing similar. So it's just making sure that your enterprise devices are nice and secure.
Okay, excellent. Well, now we will move on to our guest, Tristan. But before we do that, let's run through the event. So, Tom, as you said, September, we're getting back into the swing of things after the summer holidays. Any events we should keep an eye on?
Yeah, we're starting to get towards some in-person events, which will be exciting. But first off, virtual, we've got Teams Fireside Chat on the 11th of September. We're getting into the Dynamics 365 Contact Center. They've got some announcements that will be made by the time we do that Fireside Chat, talking about the integration to Teams. There is the Microsoft Fabric Community Conference, September 15th to 18th. That's in Austria, so that should be a really good one. Back on the virtuals, we have Copilot Fireside Chat. We have Caruana Gitamu, who's really deep into the community and everything around M365. So that's September 24th. Another virtual September 25th. We're trying something new. We're doing a community session all around the biggest Microsoft 365 changes. So we're going to take the top 5 changes, talk through them with the community. And then back to in person, we have the Microsoft UC User Group London on the 24th of September. Looking forward to that one. That's going to be really good. That's actually going to neat new London offices. So looking forward to that. And UC Expo, 1st and 2nd of October. Big UC show in London, and some really big Microsoft people coming over to talk at that. I'm not sure if the names have all been announced yet, but yeah, some really deep Microsoft sessions in that, and I'll be doing a kind of roadmap update session and the latest in Teams and Copilot there as well.
Okay, well, a lot to look forward to. However, without further ado, let's welcome our guest, Tristan Gayford. Tristan, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me.
So a bit about Tristan. Tristan has spent over 14 years in the UC sphere, including over a decade at Deloitte leading the global UC service delivery for Skype for Business and Teams. He's now working as a Teams meeting service product manager at EY, where he's responsible for delivering Microsoft Teams to 400,000 of its staff worldwide. Today, he'll be sharing his personal experience of the unique challenges of deploying Teams across multiple geographies and regulatory complexities that come with the supporting a global workforce. So, Tristan, how do you effectively measure employee or user satisfaction and team performance when deploying it to a large number of people spread across the globe? What telemetry data has also surprised you the most about that?
I think that the main thing is that there's not just one piece of data that you can look at. You know, there's the kind of the hard data, the metrics that you get out of something like CQD, telling you about jitter and packet loss and the like. But there's also the more subjective data that you can get from the product feedback in the admin center, but also from surveys and actually reaching out and speaking with your people to understand how they find the product, how they find their meetings, their channels, their chats, all of the applications within the M365 stack is actually really important. Whether you do that through the feedback from Microsoft, whether you do that through third-party tools, reaching out to people, forms, whatever it may be, blending that kind of the hard data, the raw metrics with that subjective data, that gives you a much better steer on what people are feeling. And it's that experience that, from everything I've been doing in the past 14 years is really about experience, because you can show the best network, you can show the best, the data, but if people don't feel it, it doesn't really matter. So I think that's the thing that I take away the most. And also that don't look at it from a global perspective. When you're working across hundreds of countries, if you look at the global view, typically you will see reasonable results. But when you start drilling down into those local aspects, there's individual offices, that's when you find that the networks are different, the expectations are different, the baselines and trends of those are very important. So don't just look at that global picture, look at the local. And that's one of the big takeaways that I've come out with, is that you really have to listen and understand how people are feeling it in that local aspect as well.
Okay, excellent. Well, when deploying Teams to a global workforce, what strategy do you use? Do you, for instance, install like a base level of Teams across each office, then add features and updates in a piecemeal fashion for each jurisdiction?
I mean, from my perspective, I think you want to roll out everything you can. You've invested in this product, you've invested in the suite, the E3, E5, whatever it may be. So you want to actually give people everything that you can. But that does come with its own challenges. You are going to get a disparity in a global organization between different locations for regulatory reasons, for various other reasons, potentially cultural reasons even. So you got to manage that carefully. But I strongly advocate go for the maximum feature set you can. Take things away if you need to. And I stress that word "need to." But it's better than going to absolutely the most restrictive and then preventing others from maximizing your investment.
Excellent. Well, can you share an example of how geographical differences have required you to adapt your team's deployment strategy?
Yes, it's the short answer to that one. Different countries have different regulations, different regions, EU, US. There's so many different ways that people are taking and tackling it. And even, in some of the industries, the regulatory aspect to that type of industry means that you do have to think carefully about, the features that you can offer. You also need to think about data sovereignty, residency. You need to think about the maturity levels that different countries have from a network perspective, from a technology perspective, generally, ISP perspective. I've been and experienced in different countries where you have one ISP. That's it. That's your one ISP. And of course, in those situations, you're completely beholden to what they will offer and what their SLAs are, which may preclude some of the fancier features, if you will, of Teams and video and sharing. You have other countries that are very much mobile first, and they want to use their mobile devices, and they expect to be able to use their mobile devices. So how do you make sure that they have that level of access, whereas others don't have that level? They're large countries. They have maybe good mobile service in a few of the cities and nowhere else. There are a huge number of different challenges that you really have to take into account. And that's part of the fun of it, I guess. But also it's something you do need to work very carefully to understand as you roll out teams.
Excellent. Just going back a bit, you talked about local jurisdictions and how you have to abide by some certain regulations between the US and the EU, for example. Recording and transcriptions are obviously a big one when it comes to teams. How can you create? How does this complex web of regulatory compliance procedures? How do you design a global policy around that doesn't break the laws, but it still serves your internal workforce?
You don't is the very quick answer to that one.
I thought you were going to solve everybody's problems there, Tristan. You were going to go, here's how it works, bang, bang, bang.
Absolutely. There is no one size fits all. When you've got so many different regulations, so many different countries, so many different voices, really. As I mentioned before, it's about getting the maximum you can in people's hands, but you do have to consider that defaulting back down, where there is a good, strong, justifiable reason. I think that the key for me is that communication level is making sure that where you have got the disparity between different policies in different locations, the people know what they get, they know what others can get. And that's why keeping it simple is important, because if you give a massive spreadsheet with 20, 30 different policy options and say, figure it out yourselves, it's not going to work. So I think, keep as much on as you can, or keep it off, whatever's the right approach. But, you mentioned recording and transcription, that they're the key ones. They really are the key ones. They're the ones that will get you in trouble. They're the ones that will get you out of trouble in some cases. So, you keeping it to those level, and then people can just go look up a country. They say, okay, I'm in this country. I'm in the United Kingdom. I'm talking with someone in the United States. What is the policy that we've got, based on that? But, I think the aspect around some of those, features has improved recently, or in the last year or so. Temporary transcription, so that people can use Copilot, for example. That's opened out more aspect there, because if the concern was around the longevity of that transcription, where it's being stored, changes to move it into OneDrive so that it's has the same expiration policy as the recordings. That has made a massive improvement as well. Explicit consent. So a lot of the changes that have been coming down the pipe in the last 12 to 18 months have really improved the ability to have good, strong conversations with those risk and regulatory teams.
The temporary transcription is really interesting, isn't it? Because I noticed Microsoft try not to use the word transcription. They're like, Copilot just magically works for the duration of the meeting. It's like because if you say the word transcription, then it's like, well, is it ethereal? Like, does it get saved to disk? Like, what's the point where it's a transcription versus a temporary text-based summary of or text-based kind of summary of the meeting? It's a funny line.
I know, and I've been trying to working with people and talking with peers and colleagues, and we talk about temporary transcription because that is a reasonably easy way of describing it, so people understand what it is. Yeah. But you go into meeting options, it's just enable Copilot, and that's where it's like, well, what is that? What does that mean?
Yeah, if I can't get to the transcription, did it happen? I guess it's a question.
Absolutely, yeah, exactly. So I think that's one of the challenges that we have actually generally is that communication. So when we're talking with risk teams and when we try and understand what it is that what are the concerns that they have, being very clear about what it is that's happening here is super important. Temporary transcription is a great example. Where is it? Can I get to it? Can I ask Copilot and say, hey, can you send me out the entire transcript? Those are the things that's really important to understand and to work closely with those teams that are local, because it's easy for people to say, no, I can't enable that. It's really understanding why that's the case and kind of, is there really a problem? Because we all know that if we say, no, you can't record it, no, you can't store this transcription anywhere, people will find a way. And that's what you want to avoid.
It's interesting how the AI has changed this conversation. You mentioned there, like how much work's gone into transcription and recording. And we had the product owner on the podcast a while ago talking about that. And it's all because people want the AI capabilities. So suddenly there's super motivation to get, like storing the recording in the meeting owner's OneDrive rather than anybody who happened to press the button. Huge steps forward to give people the chance to leverage the AI capabilities, I guess.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that's part of that. And actually that OneDrive recording ownership is a massive improvement. Again, it's having that, being able to say quite clearly, I know where this recording is. I know where it's stored. I know who has access to it. I know who can download it. It's very, very simple to show that. And that gives everyone a degree of comfort and feeling of control over what's going on. And Copilot and having that aspect around AI, it's not about having a recording or a transcription just because. There's actually a purpose behind it that has true business value. That's the difference that we're seeing now.
Okay, excellent. So Tristan, with many of these offices perhaps having Teams deployments with various set of features, how does this affect inter-office communication? And is there any bridge that you've managed to work that can kind of still enable this while there's this disparity in their Teams features?
Yeah, and that's always going to be the challenge, is that, why I'm meeting with someone from this country, why can they transcribe? Why can't this meeting transcribe? I did transcription last week. Why can't I do it this week? That's always going to be the challenge when you've got multiple policies in different countries. For me, this is where communications and really being strong with your communications and your change process is always going to win out. Allowing people to understand what they have, what others also have as well, and being very clear on it. Like I mentioned, being very, as simple as you can to provide that level of information. Who is the organizer of that meeting? What does that mean to your meeting? I've seen people develop the Copilot agents that pick out the various meeting policies based on a country and say, well, you meeting with this person, then you're going to have these these features available to you. But yeah, it's going to be about communication and being transparent so that everyone knows where they stand. They don't get frustrated, because that's the worst thing, is when they join the meeting, they can't do something. It's not their fault. It's not the organizer's fault. But it's Teams, and it's Teams' fault that they can't do the recording today. So yeah, we don't want people to have those nasty surprises. We want them to have the best experience, and it's important that we give them all the resources they can have to be able to do that.
Okay, and wrapping up, what are the most significant challenges organizations face and perhaps underestimate when they're deploying teams across multiple geographies?
I think most people think it's the tech side of it in multiple geographies, but it isn't. I think it's really about having that local knowledge. You can be a global technology organization. You can be very proficient and have seen it, done it with hundreds of thousands of people, but that local knowledge of how people work, the regulations, technology maturity, all of those aspects is absolutely critical. If people are remote, which in the organizations I've been working in, a lot are, how reliable is the internet outside of the offices, outside of the cities? Are we going to need PSTN access to all our meetings? Because that's really the only way you can get in when you're remote. Who is going to be the change champions locally? How do we make sure that any changes are communicated? Languages, need to be localized, making sure that's accurate. I've seen in the past with other organizations, thankfully, where the localized information is just wrong, and seen the things where people have localized an out of office response and things like that. So it's always going to be a challenge, but that's the key, is having those local champions for you, because they will tell you what needs to be done, and culture is so critical when you're dealing with multiple geographies. Are people video heavy? Do they really love to be on video all the time, or are they actually video shy? Do we have the bandwidth capable of supporting hundreds of calls a day with video, or do we need to start managing that bandwidth? Do we need to start managing the network? But I think ultimately it's about bringing people on that journey. It doesn't matter whether you're doing this in one location, multiple locations, multiple geographies. It's about having people on that journey and understanding what they need, what their experience that they want and need to be successful is. And you remember that in multiple geographies, that one size fits all approach is rarely going to be successful.
Fascinating. It's been really great to give you my questions, Tristan. Now I'd like to open up the floor to the panel to see if any of them have anything they'd like to ask you. So panel, is all yours.
I can start. We've had an opportunity to work together in previous organizations, which has been fantastic. I think we always get excited as kind of technologists, when there's new features inside of Teams, right? So from your perspective, though, when Microsoft rolls out a new chat and channel experience, or these new little mini apps that are on your Windows 11 taskbar, are you excited, or are you saying, "Oh my goodness, now I've got to deal with the whole change management and communication"? Because it feels like there's been an increasing cadence around the changes of inside a team. So I'm just interested on kind of your personal perspective on that.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, because I think there is a challenge where some of the cadence and it feels like this summer has been every other week there's been a new, actually quite visible change that's happening. And from a product management perspective, it's really understanding, okay, what is this change? What does this add? What is the value it's adding? How do we ensure people are aware of it, and how to get the most out of that particular change? Some of the changes, they're difficult. And the chatting channels is a great example of a very significant change. I think, for me personally, once I got used to it, I prefer it. I like it. But change is difficult and change is hard. And especially, we talk about workflows, we talk about their processes. It's another, piece of learning that someone's got to do. It's a change in their processes. It takes time. Sometimes I think these are good changes. Sometimes, maybe they're necessary, but they are going to give us a little bit of heartache while we go through them.
Okay, thanks.
I'm interested, Tristan, on you mentioned Copilot quite a few times and AI impacting. How are you seeing organizations deal with that as a workload? I mean, traditionally we would have had the SharePoint team, the Teams team, the Exchange team, but now within 365 it's also integrated. And then with Copilot, it's kind of even more integrated across the different workloads, yet it works in different ways in different workloads. What have you seen there?
It's a big challenge. I think you kind of have to look at it from, okay, how is Copilot going to impact my area, what I'm looking at, whether it's Teams or Outlook or wherever else, and truly understand, okay, what do I need from it? How do I approach it from that perspective? There's obviously, from an organization wide, there is rolling out AI, there is getting people licenses, getting people to use the products. That's important. But I think from how do I influence my area? How do I influence people using it in the best way possible? Really, you do have to look at it because, if I take it from a Teams meetings perspective, without transcription, Copilot doesn't really add huge amounts of value in that meeting area. You need to work on it very carefully to make sure that you're going to get the most out of it. You can get the most with it, working across all the functions. So, silos don't work where everyone just works in their own little section of Teams or own little section of SharePoint. That's not a scenario that can really, be maintained anymore.
And what about meetings? Trying to cope, as you mentioned, having meetings, transcription services, recording services. How is that? Is that a challenge across, global entities, especially as a consulting firm like yourselves? You're talking to many different platforms. How are you sort of ensuring that your data is kept within the EY network and not on third party shadow IT?
I think with those aspects, it's as I mentioned, you've got to give people the access they need. You taking away, it's very easy to say no to everything. That would be the very simplest way, and we can all go sleep well at night. But we know that shadow IT is there. And so it's important that you have that balance between what is appropriate and what gives people what they need. And again, I bang on about this a lot, about that communication. So people understand why that decision has been taken. It's not because we just don't want to offer recording, for example. It's because of these particular reasons. This is why, and this is why it's important for your organization and to make sure that your data is safe and kept secure.
Okay, so if that's all, then this is September's Microsoft Teams show wrapped up. Well, thanks to Tom, our special guest Tristan, and the entire panel for their expert insights, and also to you for tuning in each and every time. If you found today's discussion valuable, don't stay muted. Please like, share, and comment. We really appreciate your support. We'll be back next month with more Teams news, ecosystem updates, and insights that matter for your collaboration strategy. I'm Kristian from UC Today. Thanks for watching, and until next time, stay connected.